King Solomon was never the wisest man on earth. His existence is still in doubt. His self-acclaimed temple has not been discovered till today. The Europeans taught African youths in the university that Socrates was a wise man because Africans are too exhausted to research their own African history. Before even the so-called Solomon of the Jews or Socrates of the Greeks, Africans had Ptah-hotep, an African Egyptian minister who wrote the oldest book in the world, titled The Maxims of Ptah-hotep. The book was an early piece of Egyptian literature meant to instruct young men to have an appropriate behavior. According to Ptah-hotep in 2300 BCE, the wise is a person who acts with Mahat, and Mahat is the Egyptian goddess of truth, justice, balance, and order. And such person is free from falsehood and disorder. He was the first philosopher that existed over 2000 years before the existence of Socrates, Thales, Plato, and Aristotle. But our philosophy department in schools will never talk about him because it is a colonial school, and colonial schools are meant to tell you that your ancestors are inferior. When the Romans invaded Kemet, that is, when the Romans invaded Egypt in 30 BCE, they had most of the Egyptian documents, that is, Egyptian papyri, destroyed. These Egyptian papyri contains the original concept and idea of Judaism and Christianity, first practiced in Egypt by African Egyptians and documented by the Africans. When one studies the spiritual foundations of ancient Kemet, one will find the foundational mythologies that were later reformulated into the Jewish traditions, the Christian traditions, and the Islamic traditions. Now, when the Africans were worshipping Aten, the first monotheistic god worshipped by Pharaoh Akhenaten and his wife Nefertiti of the 18th dynasty, there was no Judaism, there was no Christianity, there was no Buddhism, and there was no Islam. If you go to Egypt today, you will find all the architectural elements of Solomon's temple in every temples in Egypt. The concept of Solomon's temple was copied from the rich temples built in Kemet by Africans. We are yet to see this Solomon's temple, but we have found the great temples of Africans still standing in Egypt and Ethiopia. The temple of Waset is still standing in Luxor in Egypt. The great temple of Amen or Amun-Ra, where Africans chanted Amen at the end of their prayers while worshipping the Egyptian sun god, is still standing in Egypt. The temple of Khnum, the Egyptian god who made man and his spirit over 5,000 years ago, is still standing there in Egypt. We are yet to see the temple of Solomon. We can find evidence of ancient African spirituality, but none from these mainstream religions. It shows that these mainstream religions were copied from African spirituality.